Hey, what's up guys? Kellen here with Droid Life, and we're continuing our coverage today of the Samsung Galaxy S4. So we have the AT&T version in hand, which also means we finally have a legitimate network behind it. But what I want to do today is just whip through 20 or so tips and tricks for the device, some of which you may have known or you may have seen, some of which you may not have. Some of them are just general sort of Android navigation tips for the beginners out there. The rest of them are, utilizing air view and air gestures and some of this cool stuff that Samsung has built into this new flagship device. So to get it started, I want to show off a gesture, and this can be used only when your device is laying down like this with the screen off. Now it's sort of like a preview of sorts. It gives you a clock so you can tell the time, shows you if you have missed calls or missed texts. It also shows your battery life percentage, and then it also shows you just if you have other notifications that you should check. Now in order to access this, all you do is wave your hand over sort of the top part of the device fairly close. You'll see that blue light up here, then you get a clock, and here's your missed calls, text, and battery. It's really cool. This is probably one of the features I use the most on it. You get that blue light and then lights up really quick. You can see that sort of bubble effect in the background there. Again, this can only be done, I believe, with the device laying down like this. So quick gesture, just make sure you get close enough to the device, but you don't actually have to touch it. All this stuff pops up. So it's very cool. Again, it's probably one of the features I use the most. But let's talk lock screen though for a second. Now, lock screen widgets, since this is running Android 4.2.2, are included. And I made a previous video about this, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. But basically, you can use lock screen widgets on the Samsung Galaxy S4. It's just not necessarily enabled out of the box. So what I mean by that is if we go into settings and you go into my device and you go to lock screen, you have to make sure you check this box right here for multiple widgets. That allows you to have multiple sets of lock screen widgets up. Okay. You can also go into this lock screen widgets page and go into favorite apps or camera feature, which is the far right panel, which basically if you swipe over, it either give you a list of favorite apps or a shortcut to your camera. And I'll talk about that in a second, how I wouldn't necessarily use it as my camera shortcut. And then the other big thing down here is shortcuts. So shortcuts are the apps that you have on your lock screen. So the biggest one I would say to put on here is camera, because I believe that's the quickest way to access your camera. So let's back out of here again. Box checked, shortcuts on, lock screen widgets, you can change whatever you want in there. But to access lock screen widgets, you always have to do this swipe down first, and then you can see that page sort of moves out. Then you can actually go from page to page however you want to from there. And again, I did a whole video on this, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. But what I was showing you with that shortcut swipe to the right for camera, to me, that's not the fastest way to get into your camera. So in order to access your camera, which is this page over here to the right, you have to first swipe down this, then swipe over, and it sort of does this animation and then gets you into your camera. Not necessarily the fastest way in my opinion. So this is sort of a little tip that I always try to tell people is put a camera shortcut down at the bottom. Just grab that and swipe it up. That's the fastest way to get into your camera. It saves you a few seconds, especially if you're trying to do something really quickly in your camera. I would say that's the best way to do it. All right, so now I just want to talk about a couple of just sort of general navigation tricks for Android if you're not aware of these. If you want to add or remove home screens, the easiest way is to pinch, and you sort of get into this UI where you can tap the plus and add as many home screens as you'd like. If you want to get rid of them, you just long press on one and then drag it up to remove, and it goes away. Okay, this is sort of general knowledge. You can also grab these and rearrange them and sort of set them up if you like. You can also change one to be your default home screen if you like. There's this little home button sort of at the top of each card, and you can tap that, and now that is my default home. And I actually want it to be this one, so we'll change that. I'm gonna go ahead and remove another one of these if I can. Don't be too quick or it won't work every time. The other thing I want to show you then, and this is something that HTC's actually killed off. If you long press, you get a menu that'll actually allow you to change your wallpaper on the fly like that. Again, something HTC killed off with the HTC One. So you can do a home screen wallpaper change, you can do a lock screen change, or both at the same time. You can long press in here and also get into apps and widgets, so you can quickly add apps or widgets, and again, a grab, long press, and drag around is how you do that. Long pressing also is the easiest way to make a folder in Samsung devices. So you can see I've got a couple of folders up here, and if I want to drag and drop an app to that, I can just do that. So it's the easiest way. You can't do the app drag on top of app drop to create a folder. You actually have to do it with either a long press here, or if you go into your app drawer and hit menu, create folder, that's another way to do it. Or you can grab an app, from the drawer and go up and create folder. There's all sorts of ways. It's just not the easiest way that was initially built into Android. So those are just some general navigation tips and tricks. I want to talk about quick toggles for a second though. So in Android 4.2.2, Google added in a second page that essentially gives you quick toggles. So Samsung's taken advantage of that and listed out as many quick toggles as they could possibly think of. Now you can go in here and toggle on and off NFC and S-beam and screen mirroring and all that stuff. But if you don't want to go to that whole page, you can actually swipe across this and access every single one of those toggles. So you have quite a few. If you want to rearrange these, so if you swipe down your notification bar, you have 5 that appear at your sort of beginning screen. If you ever want to adjust those, you can do that. Just go over to this screen, then you'll see this little pencil icon, and you just go ahead and tap that, and then from here you can actually long press and drag and drop and swap these out. So then you can rearrange them to be, whatever you'd like. The other thing I want to point out here is I would always leave this box checked right here for brightness adjustment. So why you would do that is depending on if you're watching a movie or you go into Samsung's gallery where they always tend to really dim down the device, which I don't know why they do that, but they've done it on every single phone. You can quickly toggle on super brightness, low brightness. You can switch it back to auto. It's really a nice way to adjust brightness on the fly at all the time. All right, so let's talk about app drawer for a second. So Samsung's app drawer is pretty straightforward, but usually when you open it up out of the box, it's not alphabetized. Now it might be alphabetized, but then when you start downloading apps, it adds them onto the back of the list, and sometimes they can be hard to find. So I always recommend going in, hitting menu and going to view type and changing to alphabetical grid. Now you can change this to however you'd like, but alphabetical grid's my favorite. That's just a sort of side swiper that keeps everything alphabetized for you. If you want to hide unwanted applications, so for example, the AT&T version comes with all sorts of bloatware. So if you hit menu and go down to hide applications, you can go in here and checkbox everything that you want hidden. Now, if you hide something and want to access it later, you can hit menu again and go show hidden applications. You can see these are all the AT&T bloatware apps that I've actually hidden, but you could check those and hit done and it would show back up. So I want to make sure you're aware that you can hide applications without, some of these you can't uninstall. So there's a good way to just sort of tuck them into the background. All right, now let's talk about some of the cool stuff, right? Let's go into gestures, air gestures, air view, some of these really neat things that Samsung's done with their with TouchWiz. So in order to enable most of these, you need to go into settings and you need to go into the My Device tab. Now if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, you get this input and control section, and here you'll see motions and gestures, smart screen, air view, and voice control. So if we go into motions and gestures, I have turned on air gesture, which allows me to wave over my device and do things, which I showed you in the beginning with that quick preview of the clock. Motion allows you to, so say you have a contact up, let's actually go into this. Say you have a contact, you're looking at someone's contact, you can actually put the phone to your ear and it'll just make a call automatically. You don't actually have to hit the call button. It's kind of cool. I'm not a big fan of the motion ones, but I am definitely a fan of the air gestures. So in air gestures, you can do quick glance, and that's with the phone laying down, you can swipe over it. Air jump allows you to scroll through web pages using a gesture. I'll get to that in a second. Air browse allows you to jump between pictures and pages and things like that with gestures. All sorts of cool things that I'll definitely show you in a second. The other one down here is air call accept, which allows you to answer a call without actually touching your device. We'll show you that too. There's some other ones in there, but these are just the ones I wanted to show off today. So if we go into air view, this is where you can actually use your finger to, hover over things and show off some kind of cool things by using your finger, something only the Galaxy Note 2 can do with a pen. They've actually updated the screen technology in the Galaxy S4. You can now do it with a finger. So I've left in your information preview, progress preview, speed dial preview, and web page magnifier active in here. We'll try to show you as many of those as I can. So let's start first with air view. And I want to go back to the lock screen just for a second. Now this is just sort of a silly little trick. Now if I just hover my finger, you can see there's a little ball of light that's sort of following it around under there. Has absolutely no purpose other than it looks cool, but it's a trick you can always show off to your friends. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and unlock and get you guys out of there. Let's jump into the gallery, because the gallery definitely has some cool tricks to it. So if I go ahead and go into camera, actually let's go into this camera, you can go ahead and hover a finger over little thumbnails, and actually will show you a bigger picture without actually tapping to go into it. It's not incredibly practical, but it is kind of a cool little feature. So there's that going on in there. If we actually go into a picture, now this is where I want to show you an air gesture. So if you're looking at images, you can actually wave your hand over it and it'll change pictures. So you can just kind of thumb between pictures and it'll go both ways. So very kind of cool gesture stuff, especially if your hands are grubby or your phone's laying down, you don't want to touch it and you're showing somebody something. You actually don't have to be holding your device. It's very cool. So let's go ahead and jump into the browser now. Now, you have to actually use the Samsung browser, not Google Chrome. Okay, so if we go into the actual browser, load this up, you've got Droid Life in here. Okay, so if we're in here, and you can see I have 2 tabs open. So if I want to switch between tabs, again, I don't actually have to touch the device. I can just swipe over or swipe back and it'll get me in between tabs. Now, if I want to scroll down the page, I can actually just flip my finger up or down and it scrolls up and down, which is kind of cool. Now you can also, at least you should be able to hover over text with your finger, and you can see it brings up a sort of magnified version of it. So you don't actually have to pinch to zoom to view text that's hard to read. You can just hover with your finger, which is always kind of cool. Another thing I always like about this air gesture is if you have a menu on a website, you can actually hover over. Let's actually see if we can get closer and do this. So say our specs list, if I want to do hover over that, at least it used to work. There we go. Nope, not necessarily working. I thought it used to work, at least on the Galaxy Note 2, where you could hover over that, but actually drop down a menu. This appears to not want to do that. So trust me, you can do it on some stuff. Let's also show you in the dialer, if we go in here. If you set up, what are they? Quick shortcuts basically for a dialer or dialer shortcut, you can actually hover over these with your finger and they will tell you which ones they are. So in case you set some up and you forget which ones they are, you can actually hover your finger and it'll tell you what that is. So then the last gesture I wanted to show you then is answering a call. So if a call comes in, let's see if I can place a call to myself here. Call comes in, you should be able to just wave your hand over it back and forth and that should answer it. So assuming it comes in, there we go. So I should be able to wave over and you can see it answered it. And you can talk to someone and it should go right into speaker, which it did. So you could have your phone laying down on the desk and do that as well. And it launches right into speaker so that you don't have to worry about touching your device. It's really a hands-free sort of feature there. All right, so let's talk about multi-window. So multi-window is a feature introduced with, I believe, the Galaxy Note 2. It's also equipped on the Galaxy S4. So you long press on the back button down here, pops up this sort of side panel that gives you the option to use Chat on, Chrome, and a handful of apps. You can hide it or remove it, or pull it out, I'm sorry, by just swiping out this little arrow over here. And it's got a limited number of applications, although some developers are actually building in support, like you can see Falcon Pro's in there. So if you want to use this, essentially all you do is grab one and move it onto your screen to start with. And then if you want to add something else, like internet, you grab that and you can either place it top or bottom. Now you can resize these to be as big or small as you'd like. You can go ahead and swap them. You can close one and make one full screen. You can do all sorts of stuff. I can hit home and it'll just get me out of both of them. And if you don't want this sort of side panel showing up any longer, go ahead and long press on back and then it goes away until you decide you want to use it again. So it's very cool, pretty powerful feature for anyone that's actually doing multitasking. You could watch video in one and be taking notes or something in other, pretty cool. So the other things I want to show you are sort of basic navigation tricks. So to access Google Now, since this is Jelly Bean, access Google Now on Samsung phones, you long press the home button and you get into your sort of app task switcher. And so in here, you can actually swipe stuff away just like you would in normal Android. So you can do that. You can actually hit this X box down here and it'll wipe all of them out. But if you want to get to Google Now, hit this Google button and it launches you into Google Now. So again, long press, then hit that. That's really the quickest way. There's another way that's sort of similar and it's really just how to get into Google Search. And it's long press on menu from anywhere and that gets you to Google Search, which is sort of like getting into Google Now, though you can see it doesn't have the header up top. It's really just the search UI. So anyways, that's it. That's about 10 or so, that's about 20 or so tips and tricks for the Galaxy S4. Some of that stuff I hope you guys can take advantage of. It should help you just sort of navigate and using your device in general. So stick with us. We got more coming. We're Droid Life. Peace.